All right, Brother Tim's ready to take the tithe and offering. Is there anybody else? Throw your hand up. Then we'll let you bring it up here. Any more? Last minute, last call. All right. Pastor Mark, it's all yours.
Yeah, you can go ahead and turn off. So my watch is 2 minutes slow, evidently. I thought I had a 2-minute warning, but that was 5 minutes ago, I think. Okay, we did that at the risk of you falling asleep tonight, so the front area, please stay with me, okay? It's a great honor and privilege to be here and be able to speak tonight. I was thrilled when the pastor asked me to come and share with you guys about what we're doing in Romania and the project there. I was so excited that I forgot the date. I booked an airline ticket to fly back today and had to change the ticket to come back earlier. And I've not had a late flight in multiple flights, many flights. And 2 weeks ago, I had a 3-hour delay, and I was like, oh, Lord, I'm not going to make it back. That flight's going to get canceled. So I went into Jeff's office before I took off this week, and I said, Jeff, I said, man, can you cover me? I said, if I come in and I'm late, can you just substitute and do it? He said, I got you covered. So I was like, great, this is wonderful. So today has been a day of great triumphs and conflicted emotions and decisions I've made. I got on my first flight this morning, and I was still working on my presentation, and I had a middle seat. It wasn't that bad. So I sat down in the middle seat, and there were two ladies beside me that filled up their seat, but not too bad. And so I said, let me ask you, I said, do either one of you know how to do PowerPoint? And both of them were like, yeah, we do PowerPoint all the time. I was like, fantastic, here's my problem. And so they were able to help fix my problem and get me going to complete tonight's presentation. And I was like, this is fantastic. And then I was working so much on the plane, I got a little car sick. And when we landed, I forgot that we had a service member whose body was being flown, and they asked us to stay on the plane until they took care of that. So I'm sitting there going, oh, Lord, I need to get off this plane bad. And we finally get done with that, and it was quite a honor to see that happen. And the servicemen who gathered around the plane, and it was done with honor and respect. But so I had a nice layover at Atlanta Airport, and it's time for my plane to board at 4:30. And they come on and they say, we need 2 volunteers. We've overbooked the plane. We need 2 volunteers to take the later flight at 10:30 tonight. And we're offering $400 apiece if you'll take that flight. I was like, man, $400. Any other day I could have done that with no sweat. I just called Lisa and said, hey, you'll see me later tonight, but you'll like it. And then it's like a few minutes go by, and they come on and go, we're looking for 2 volunteers still, $800 each. You talk about conflicted. I didn't know if I loved y'all that much or not. And as I'm making my way to the gate and getting ready to board, she comes on and she says, we still need one more volunteer for $1,000. Did you know it's worth $1,000 to go between Atlanta and Greenville? That's amazing. But because I love y'all, I passed up $1,000. So I need to hear some amens and shouting and running tonight. And this is no, that was the first time, and I hope it's not the last time I get to hear that, because I will take it the next time. But I'll play the odds and see how long we can go. So I was going to talk exclusively tonight about Romania, because that's what the offering was for and what we've done. And some of you guys have asked me prior to service what the Ukraine situation is and what's like. And so I'm going to deviate a little bit and still try to get you out of here by 9 tonight. So anyway, we have, you ate what? Eight. I I have a map of Ukraine and Romania up here on the map, on the screens, and I'll highlight some things in a minute here. As your missions pastor, I love missions. I'm thrilled to go, and I appreciate your prayers, and I don't want you to stop praying for me. But trust me, I don't go in crazy and do crazy things and go crazy places, okay? One, I enjoy being married. It's been a good marriage, and I want to continue being married, so I don't go do crazy things. A lot of places we go are just as safe as America is. You don't go in certain cities. You don't go in certain parts of town in America. You use wisdom wherever we go. So I'm not in harm's way. I'm not in battle zones. There's no need for us to do those kind of things. So what we did, what we're doing, is we have partnered. If you hear anything when I talk about missions, I like to talk about partnering with people. If you want to talk about numbers, there's 1.2 to 2 billion people who have never heard the name of Jesus in the world. If I tried to attack that with our denomination, the Church of God has 7 million members worldwide. 6 million of those are outside the United States. If you want to divide 1.2 billion by 6 million, we would never get the task done. We're not in those areas. So we need to collaborate. When you collaborate with someone else, you partner with others, we combine resources, we combine contacts and reach, and we're able to do things faster, better, and more effectively. So that's what I do with our money. When we do things, we are collaborating, we're matching money, we're getting partners who have resources, and they'll help us, and we'll go further. So in Ukraine, I was able to travel there a few years ago. I believe it was 2018. 2014 and 15 was when Russia initially invaded parts of Ukraine. That was when they took Crimea. Crimea is here off the coast. This is Ukraine, here in the middle. And Crimea is out here in the Black Sea. And they took control of this, and the invasion into Ukraine was more along the northern border here, Kharkiv, and further south and west is where the initial occupation was. Since that day, since 2015, there has been continuing shelling going on in that region. You don't hear about it on the news because it's not a big war going on. They are occupying that space. There are Soviet Russian sympathizers living in that area. We were driving along and we saw someone walking, and we were with some military chaplains, and they stopped the van and went out and spoke to the person. It's like, how's it going? Has the shelling been bad? And the person's response amazed them. It was like, no, we haven't had shelling in quite a while. And the chaplain was surprised because he thought it was ongoing. And he says, really, how long has it been? Expecting to hear a couple, 3 days. Oh, 2 or 3 hours. But they had become that desensitized to the situation. Houses were boarded up because of shrapnel. You didn't know where the bomb was going to go. You didn't know where the shelling was going to happen, when it was going to happen. So you looked like you were driving through abandoned villages and homes, but there were people living there. So that's been ongoing. The church I went to the first time I was there was the Church of God. It's as big as our church, size-wise, attendance-wise. The pastor's office, he had a display of shells and leftover armor that was in supplies that the Russians had left. And they had actually led him around the building at gunpoint during that occupation. And they had pulled back from that location. So in December, you may remember there was a gentleman visiting with us. He was he's German, he lives in Ukraine. He's the education director for Ukraine. And he was visiting with us and attended church. And I said, Ebby, are you not concerned? I said, the U.S. News is saying that there's going to be an invasion. And Ebby's like, I'm not really concerned. I don't think it's going to happen. And Ebby lived in Slavonsk. He lives in that region. We ended up sending Ebby back with $5,000 to help buy firewood for the churches along the front line there, because they're so poor they didn't have firewood, and it was super cold in that region. And he was doing that. And he was even asking me, could we help him buy a building in one of those cities? And I was like, Ebby, I'm just not feeling good about buying a building that's not going to be owned by Ukraine very long, or maybe even standing. Within a month, he was texting me saying, things have changed a lot here. He says, we're getting very concerned. And luckily, Ebby's mother lives in Germany, and she was turning 94, I believe, and he had already planned a trip out to see her. And he flew out on Monday or Tuesday, and I think Wednesday the invasion started. So he was able to get out and be safe. He did have a daughter and son-in-law. His daughter is pregnant, and of course, they couldn't leave the country. She didn't want to leave her husband and being pregnant, and they went to the west of Ukraine and were able to find a house that some people had left, said they could stay there, and another pregnant family moved in with them. So there were 2 pregnant ladies living in this house, riding the war out. So as a little geography lesson here, we are involved in Romania. And the orphanage is up here. Here's the town of Suceava. This is where I went to the border. We call this the border region of Ukraine. We have an orphanage just in this area here in the mountains. And this used to be, prior to World War II, part of Moldova. So the Moldova region, comes down through here. And this is a very religious, Pentecostal heavy area of Romania. Just across the border into Ukraine and Chernivtsi here, this used to be Romanian territory prior to World War II and the end of the world. And so there's a lot of Romanian-speaking people in this area. And we had contacts here that could come across the border into Suceava and pick up food supplies. So we have a warehouse that we're using part of, and we are shipping food from Bucharest here in the south up to Suceava. We're purchasing things in Suceava, but now they've put some restrictions on us in Suceava because of supply. We were buying skids of flour and cornmeal and sugar and so forth, and now they're limiting us to 1 case because the shop owners want to keep enough food there for the Romanian customers also. No, so there's no fighting or anything in this area. It's the most surreal thing I've ever experienced in my life, is to be here in Suceava and know that there's a war going on in the next country. You don't see it, smell it, hear it, and everybody's life is just going on like normal. So the war and the attacks are mainly, this is Kyiv, this is the capital city, this is the Chernobyl area. You've heard of the city of Kharkiv. The war has been concentrated through here and on down into the south here. Odessa is in bad shape. This is the city of Mariupol in the south. No, it's not. It's further over. This region has been under heavy attack, and the west or the east towards the border with Russia here. So you heard of Lviv on the news. This is where mainly all the people have fled to. And when we say people have fled to, no man between 16 and 60 can leave the country. So you mainly have women and children. Up until last 2 weeks, this had been a safe area, and a mortar or something was fired into Lviv, for the first time, and it killed 2 or 3 people there. And so that they're feeling more unsafe. They would leave Lviv and go across into Poland. So here's Poland, here's Warsaw, and Krakow is in this area here. So on my trip, we flew into Bucharest, came up to Suceava, saw the operations, went by the orphanage, checked on it, went back to Romania or Bucharest, flew up to Warsaw, down to Krakow, met with the Church of God here. Poland has taken in the most refugees of any nation in the region. I think there's been close to 5 million people have fled fled Ukraine. But you got to remember there was 40+ million people in Ukraine prior to the war. So when we say 5 million have fled, there's still 35 million plus living there. Most of the people that fled in the beginning had money and were able to get to the border, cross the border, and maybe fly out somewhere across Europe or even to the U.S. and be with family and friends. The second wave of people are those who did not have the money to go any further, so they've made it into Krakow, Slovakia, Hungary, into Romania. I think Romania's had 150 to 200,000 people. 50,000 of those have stayed in Romania. But for the most part, they've been absorbed into the system. So you don't see big refugee camps or tent cities anywhere. You don't see any of that because churches, individuals have welcomed people into their homes. Our friend Eileen that we partner with that runs the orphanage there, he said, I can't get people to take an orphan home for a day. He said, but when the war broke out, he said, on the border there were civilians, Romanian civilians, lined their cars up and would take anybody that came across the border home with them just to give them safe haven. Same thing happened in Poland. We were talking to the Church of God leader there, and he said, everybody's just taking people in. And you don't know how long they're going to stay, you don't know how long they're going to be. But there's a thought that a lot of these people remember what happened to them and their families in the war, in World War II. So there's a mutual feeling of an empathy there that they want to help serve and protect those people. So if I had to explain it in a context that you might understand or get a better grasp of, let's say that North Carolina is at war, and the war is going on in Raleigh and Fayetteville and Wilmington and out on the coast, and I went to Gastonia, and people from Charlotte came across the border. That's geographically what it's almost like. So everybody's life was just going on like normal. There was no sense of there's a war going on. If I'd woken up and never read the news, I would have never known there was a war next door in the next country. Same in Poland. Life goes on. Unfortunately, we have short attention spans in the United States. I'm standing on the border, literally, at the crossing, and I'm looking at my phone, looking at the news, and I see the headline of the war in Ukraine and Will Smith getting slapped. They're even. And while I'm there, they're bouncing back and forth, what's going to be on top. The sad reality of the war there is it's not going to end tomorrow, and even if it did end tomorrow, the devastation and destruction that's happened is going to be life-changing for a number of years. I was reading a ministry, Slavic Gospel Association, and Slavic is the Russian Slavic area people, and he was taking in refugees and working with them, and he says, I have a bunch of women and children, naturally. He says they are unsure if their house is still standing. He says, so they think they may have lost their house. And says, and the sad reality of it is they may lose their husband, too. And so we're going to have a whole multitude of people women and children who will lose their husbands, fathers, brothers, and lost their homes and everything else to live in. So while we are trying to ship food and supplies across and get to the cities to feed these people, it's not going to end soon. It's not going to be an easy thing. And when it does end, the need's going to continue. I really hadn't planned to talk a lot about Ukraine. And I know you hear some doubt and you wonder, is it real? And you hear conflicting reports. So when our first trips to Ukraine, we went across, I met with the Bible Society of Ukraine. The Bible Society of Ukraine was the gateway into the country and got us access to multiple denominations and the ability to share the gospel with a lot of people. We've maintained that relationship. So Victoria, Lisa and I met Victoria. She was in Hendersonville a couple of years back, and we went up and took her to lunch and spent some time with her. Victoria lived in Kyiv with her husband. Kiev, which, however you prefer to pronounce that. Her husband is the Deputy General Secretary of the Bible Society. There's a figurehead, that's the president of the Bible Society, and then you have the guy that does all the work. Anatoly, her husband, he's the guy that does the work. They're both in their early 40s, if that. They have two small kids, a boy and a girl. When the war broke out, Anatoly said, I'm staying here to keep the Bible Society open and take care of our small church that we had and take care of people. Victoria and her kids went out to Lviv, to the west, to the safety. Victoria is a strong-willed fighting woman. And the next thing we know, myself and my partner of another ministry are getting calls from Victoria. How can you help us? We need food. We need this. We need that. We need body armor. We need helmets. We need buses. And they would take a bus and they would load it with food in Lviv, send the bus into town. It's an 8-hour journey into Kyiv. Anatoly and his team would unload the bus with food, and he would have women and children waiting, and they'd load the bus back up with the women and children and turn the bus back around. And that was going on all day, every day of the week. It's tough when you get stories. You know, the time difference, I wake up and I have multiple.
We are friends visiting families which survived here in basements, and they're telling us, because we bring them food, and they're telling us how they cook food. This is the meal for this couple family. Як вас звати?
Ірина.
Пані Ірина.
Володимир.
Irina and Vladimir.
Всім привіт.
Yes, they survived here in basements, couldn't leave their home.
Это наши машины.
There are cars they had before. You see, all cars is damaged because that was fighting here.
Тут дивіться, ми жили.
Да. They invited me.
Первая бомба упала вот.
Here came first
Взорвалась.
bomb.
Вот это, видите все?
Everything
Все
is
вот это, с машины вот это. Туда
damaged.
полетело. Все вот это.
And here they inviting me to see.
Смотрите, Анатолій, смотрите, які руки.
Look how my hands look like after 50 days,
Да.
almost. So I go and see. Покажете, да, як ви живете?
Да, Володя, там зараз Анатолій зайде подивиться.
They
Дивіться, заходьте,
survived here
заходьте.
in basement.
Заходьте, будь ласка.
Заходите, тут я.
So they show me around.
Сейчас я включу фонарь. Тут мы жили без света.
They lived here without electricity
Это сейчас
all
уже
those 49
аккумулятор.
days.
Вот это мы здесь 5 человек жили с ребенком.
5 people lives here with the small kids in this small room. So you see food provision, food they eat here,
Кто-то все жили здесь.
they sleep here. 5 people, 5 family members with a small kid.
Это наша была вся жизнь здесь.
That was our life here.
Вот это все было жизнь.
Under the bombing. Дякую вам, що ви показали. Дуже вам дякую.
Да, не за что.
A couple times a week, I get those multiple pictures and videos If you have any concerns that you're being lied to, that it's fake, it's not real, don't be deceived, my friends. The war in Ukraine is real. People are dying. People are losing their homes, losing their lives, and it's a terrible, terrible situation. So we have good, solid partners, and that's what it's all about is having good people you can trust and rely upon. We were able to we're sending food. The money, we had a donor give money. We matched that money. I turned around and had a partner match that money, so it was over $100,000 we were able to put into buying food and gas. You know, it's one thing to say, oh, we're sending food. It's $1,000 to fill the truck up. It's $500 to fill a bus up and to have enough gas to get to the city of Kyiv and turn back around, because you can't buy gas along the way. Eileen, with our orphanage, when the war broke out, he says, I feel like there's people who need buses and vans and so forth. And he said, I had an idea. I'd call a couple of people. One was the refugee ministry that we're taking the refugees in Bucharest. And he said, I just called to ask them, do you think it's a good idea? He said, so I called and said, if you could get a van, would that be good? Would you need a van? And they heard, can I give you my van? And so they were like, yes, we'd love to have your van. And Eileen's like, man, what do I do now? So he said, I gave him my van. He said, I called another ministry and said, what about you guys? Are you needing any help with transportation? And he said, yeah, we had 4 vans. We've lost all 4 in running food into Ukraine. They've been shot. We've lost a driver. He was shot and killed, and all the vans have been destroyed. So Eileen gave away another van. The orphanage had multiple months of food supplies on hand because of the blessings of food coming in and him distributing it to soup kitchens and feeding centers. He said, I decided we can't sit on that when people are starving around us. And he said, I kept a 30-day supply of food for the orphanage, and the rest we've given away to move out. So the struggle I have with missions is making sure we are with the right people and with the right partners, and we honor God. I have to be a good steward of the money you guys have given that God's given me to be a steward over. And hopefully we can get this to come back up. Otherwise, I'm going to have to describe the pictures. Okay, so the Easter offering went towards the purchase of what we're calling Project 40, and it's a facility in Romania. And I wanted to try to show you how we got to where we are today. All right, so this journey started about 10 years ago when I was looking for people to partner with Praise Missions. So some of you have come from other churches and other places, and you may have said your church had 20 missionaries you supported around the world. And that's wonderful. I'm thankful that your church was doing that. Sometimes, though, those levels of support may be a little thin or shallow. Praise, our approach has been to get into a relationship with reliable partners and go deep and be solid. So because our missions money is budgeted, that means I know what I'm going to have every month of the year to spend. I can promise a missionary, we're going to support you for the next year at this level. Don't worry about your check coming in. Don't worry about fundraising. Your check's going to be there. And praise God. You don't know what that does for people, for missionaries. And it's because of your faithfulness that they don't worry. They know their check's going to be there. So we have a 10-plus year relationship with Bread of Life in Romania. The reason we got into a relationship with them, they were taking care of orphans. They were taking care of widows. They were taking care of lepers. They were growing their own crops. And I'm thinking, wow, where do you find that combination in one place? And I went and visited and checked them out, and you'll see some of the early pictures. They actually would contract with farmers and locals and grow potatoes, and the potato harvest would come in, and they would share the potatoes with the seminary in Bucharest. They would share it with the government orphanage. They would share with widows in town and take supplies on to the leper colony. There's still a small leper colony there in Romania. And so I thought, this is just great. It's good to see a solid organization. So, like I said, they're up in the mountains. If you had to compare it with something, I would compare the orphanage being in a place like Appalachia in a setting like Gatlinburg, the Smoky Mountains. We have the capacity to hold about 100 kids. Right now we're around 60. Most of these children are not true orphans. I'm going to speed up because I have a lot of pictures in a little time. It's just like in the United States. You're becoming more of a foster care service where the parents are not able to take care of the kids. A lot of these kids, their parents have left them. One parent has left them to go to another country in hopes of making an income and sending the money back to support the family. 99% of the time, that does not happen. The father goes away, he goes to get a job, he may send a check or two, and then he drops off the face of the earth and there's no money. Now it's mom and the kids. So mom says, I'm going to go do the same thing. I'm going to go find a job. Well, she ends up going, and many times, sorry to say, she ends up in prostitution. And the money doesn't come back. Now the kids are with grandparents. There's no social net in Romania. If you're a retired person, you don't have a Social Security coming in. If you get anything, it's about $50 a month. So these kids are now living with grandparents who can't take care of them and don't know where they are, don't know what's going on, or they're taking care of themselves, and they become wards of the state or wards of our orphanage. So here's where the orphanage is. Again, it's a poor area. This used to be a uranium mine and coal mine area prior to the fall of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union fell, those places shut down, and this town became dependent upon forestry. It reminds me of the Pigeon River up in the Smokies. You still have very poor agricultural-based people. This guy's got a load of hay that he will stack. This was probably November. He was getting ready for the winter. This is the street outside the orphanage. This was 10 years ago. This is a typical room inside. This building was actually a dorm and a shower. This was the community shower for that community back in its heyday. It has 4 floors. The 4th floor is a attic loft area where they have games on one side, and on the other side they have a chapel area. This is part of the kitchen. We were there, and we went into the warehouse, and they had boxes of oatmeal. And I said, man, that's good stuff. I said, that's what you guys need. It's full of protein, and the kids should like that. And Eileen says, our kids hate it. I was like, wow, they hate oatmeal? He said, yeah. He says, that's how you fix it. He said, we just put it in a bowl and pour milk on it. I said, dude, I'd hate it too, man. I was like, you got to cook the stuff. He said, you be kidding. My mother used to use oatmeal and make an apple crisp. And I said, you guys got apples? So we made apple crisp one night, showed them another way to eat oatmeal. They loved it. They loved it. We made this is the dining room area. We also made pizzas. It was me and Rhonda Neal and Teresa Andrus on our first trip there. Some of these kids had never had pizza, and we went in and made pizza and let the older ones come in and make their own pizzas that night. Biggest time they ever had, I think. The girls came in and did theirs. Eileen's chopping things. Remember these faces. Here's a little kid sitting around eating pizza. These kids have never left that village. They had no idea. There's not a Domino's there. They had no idea what a pizza was. So the other part of the orphanage, again, remember the orphanage is up in the north in the mountains, and the headquarters and the warehouses in Bucharest. Along this main road, it goes through on the east side of Romania. You're in a farming area. I could look out the window of the car and see a field until it dropped off the horizon. I'd look out the other side and I could see the field till it ran up the side of the mountain and it got too steep. For hours, it's an 8-hour drive between the two, and for hours you were just seeing fields. So you have a large community of Roma people. You may have heard them called gypsies. They are the poor, they are the agricultural pickers, the labor for harvest. So that means that they thrive during harvest, and then during winter, come around the spring, they're in destitute, bad shape. So we do things like help buy school supplies. When school starts back up, if these kids don't have the supplies, they don't get to go to school. So Bread of Life will go out and supply the communities. So what happened on that highway is we started building feeding centers, and we would partner with churches and organizations, and we would actually set up kitchens. We would take, I've been there with them, we'd take pots and pans and a little stove and a propane tank, and we would supply them food, and they would cook. They would get volunteers from the church to come in, and they would cook a hot meal once a day, 5-6 days a week, and feed these kids. Here's a church that was under construction, and these kids are there getting their meal for the day. Even some of the widows in town would come in and be fed. If you look on the table there, that's a big plate of pasta. So we would give them things that they could make soup with and pasta, and this is just peasant food. It wasn't anything fancy. It was typically no meat in the dish. Sometimes we'd do coat drives. We would send money, or we'd send coats. Other partners they had would send coats, and here we are distributing coats and winter hats that day. Rhonda's helping that little fellow zip up there. Here's a lady, typical scene in the village. She's pulling a cart with steel wheels. This is a typical gypsy wagon. They cut a lot of firewood and trees down and haul them in these. The family had just been fed. They have no clue on how to clean and wash their hands and everything, so we have to teach hygiene and supply them with soap in these churches. Just not part of their culture. It struck me today as I was putting this together. These are 10, say 8, 9, 10-year-old pictures. Where's that kid today? And does he remember what you did for him? She's eating a granola bar that was shipped in from the United States. Gaylord boxes, big boxes of breakfast bars. There's Eileen with the school supplies. Kids are beautiful all around the world. They have no choice about what's happened to them, where they are, and it's part of our responsibility to take care of them. This is a gentleman where the orphanage is located. A few years ago, we were able to do a thing where we had Meals on Wheels in Romania, but it was the boys at the home riding bicycles with their backpacks on and taking these little Tupperware containers, and they take a meal out to the senior adults around the neighborhood. This is a typical indoor of a house there. That in the corner is the stove, the heater, all wood-fired, coal burning. And you can see all the rugs on the floor. It just so happened that the day we were there, Eileen had got a call from social services about a child they had found that needed help. And we went out searching for the little fellow. I don't have all the pictures. I could chronicle it for you some, but we stopped in 2 or 3 different places trying to find this kid, and Eileen would go and talk to children playing that he would see, and he'd ask about him, and finally they pointed us to the right place. I don't have the picture of Eileen talking to the father. The father was an alcoholic. And the little boy, that's all he had was his dad. And he didn't want to leave his dad because that was all he's familiar with. But in the end, we were able to convince him to come back with us. So here he is. He's walking with Eileen and the social worker to the van. And Eileen's trying to convince him, come on, let's go. It's going to be all right. I got a picture later in the week of that little boy, a big old smile on his face. He had had a hot bath. He had new clothes. He'd been fed 2 or 3 times. And he was already acclimating and getting used to that new environment of love and safety and security. You provided that. You helped provide that on a monthly basis. Some kids we couldn't get to come to the orphanage, and this was one case. We went to this home, and we parked down in the bottom there. Beautiful place, just gorgeous. But you can see it's me and Teresa, and Matt Wilson was with us, and Rhonda. We're carrying bags and cans of food, and we get up to the top of the hill, and this grandmother is there. She's in her 70s, going on 80, lives by herself with her 2 grandkids, 2 grandsons. The daughter has fled, left the country, gone to Italy, and you know the rest of the story. And she will not let us take the young men with us. She has a milk cow. She shovels out the stall herself every day. The home she invited us in, it was pretty rough. The boys, she didn't know where they were. We told her we'd come back later, so that night we came back by that area and found the boys. And here they are, 2 brothers. But you can see the reason we wanted to get him out of that house was he had infection all around his eyes because of the filth inside that home. But she didn't want to let him go, and he wouldn't leave her. So we had to leave that little fellow there and try to get medicine back to him. This is another little family. No, it's much like here. Much like here. Seasonally, yes. We would take food. We were taking and dropping off food for this family. The father was needing help, and there were 2 more kids that weren't in the picture. So now we're back in Bucharest. In Bucharest, we have a warehouse. And when we say we have a warehouse, we have a couple of rooms on the 3rd or 4th floor of a building that you get to through a freight elevator. And we don't have a fork truck. We have pallet jacks. There's a staircase that you can walk up 4 floors if the elevator is not working, which it doesn't work all the time. There's no pallet racking in the warehouse in our space. It's pallets stacked on top of pallets. And these young ladies are part of what we call the Youth Transition Program, YTP. So up there where the orphanage is, the school system is not that great. But you have young people who start excelling and showing that they can do well in school. And so when they become in the high school age, we'll bring them down to Bucharest and put them into a Christian school and put them in an apartment. We have boys' apartments and girls. And there they learn life skills. They get a better education. They learn to budget. They learn to cook and take care of themselves. They go to church. They have mentors that work with them. This was a dream. Again, this was 8 years ago in the very beginning. Today, there are 40 kids in that YTP program, and apartments have been made available. We've been able to purchase apartments and expand this program. We could be up to 60 next year because of the number of kids that are coming through. But these kids would show up and help fill the warehouse. So I've seen them climb up on stacks and toss boxes of rice mills and food and cans of green beans and stack them up just to make use of the space because they couldn't afford more space and we didn't have opportunity for it. The thing about these 3 young ladies and the pictures and the ones I said remember those faces, all these girls came out of bad situations. There was one young lady, she decided to live in the barn was better, to live in the horse stall was better than to be in the house with a drunk father. And one night the horse kicked her and about knocked her jaw off. So she had to have surgery, had a big scar and everything. She's healed up. But that young lady's doing well. One of these young ladies in this picture has graduated the program, got a job, got married, has a child now, and has broken the cycle. These kids live in a cycle. All they know is poverty. All they know is Eileen brought a little girl home with him or to the orphanage from a family of one of our feeding centers. She was 13. She got sick riding in the car because she had never ridden in the car before. And he brought her and 2 or 3 siblings with him and got them into the orphanage, and they stayed for a while. And they wanted to go back and kept begging to go back home. And he takes them back, and they don't leave. And he finds out within 6 months she's been married off at 14 and has a child. And that's the cycle they live in. And so this is all leading up to where we're going. This is Eileen. He had a little more hair then. This couple was taking food to the leper village. When we ship containers over, this is what it looks like. A container shows up. We actually packed this container. We were a receiving area when they would do shoe boxes around the United States. They would ship the shoe boxes here, different churches, organizations, and I would containerize them. That's why we built the warehouse, so we can hold those things and fill up a container. So this container has buckets and Christmas shoe boxes. There's all kind of chairs and office equipment in there. Again, it's getting ready to be unloaded by hand in a hand-powered hand truck. You know what that box is full of right there? That's what we call a Gaylord box. If you're in shipping, it's a Gaylord. It's a thick-walled open box. That box is about this tall, and it is full of sheets and pillowcases. Barney Gibson, anybody know Barney? Barney Gibson works at a hotel in Greenville, and these nice hotels, I learned this through one of my sons, if they get a little stain or you go to a hotel and you wipe your makeup off on your towels and everything and that stain won't wash out, to maintain their franchise and their standards, they have to get rid of that sheet, towel, whatever. That is full of sheets and pillowcases. We have done that 3 or 4 times. I've got a whole load down there right now we're getting ready to ship. You see a container down there? That container is headed to Romania in the next month. That's a load of tile right here. There's a skid of tile there. We shipped over. This is tile being unloaded at the orphanage or at the farm near the orphanage. Why do we buy a container? We could easily rent a container and ship it, pack it and ship it. But when I buy a container, it's theirs on the other end. They own it on their side. So now it's a locked, waterproof storage. So here they are offloading that container, the empty one, at the farm, and this became rat-proof. They could store the feed in there and so forth, and pretty much theft-proof because no one's going to break into it. We have a small farm area and the secondary warehouse up at the orphanage. This is just about a mile from the orphanage. We used to have cows and pigs, but that's wasn't as beneficial as we thought it would be. I've picked up things around the state of South Carolina. Other churches have volunteered and brought stuff, and this is one trip I made with the trailer. People ask me, hey, what can I do to help? Do you need anything? I'll take whatever, almost. Thelma Espinoza, one of our Filipinos, works at BMW in the cafeteria. Thelma has been working there many years, and the staff love her. So when the cafeteria contract is up and a new company comes in to run the cafeteria, they typically ask Thelma to stay on. Well, Thelma knows that when she stays on and the new owners come in or new provider, they'll want to change things out and get rid of stuff. So Thelma will call me, hey, Pastor Mark, I've got all kind of stuff. You want it? I'm like, you always know I want it. Yes. I've gotten pots and pans and cases of cups and things that were brand new, but they just didn't fit the new vendor's numbers. And so we go pick those things up and we put them on a container and they get put to use. These things get passed out at feeding centers, used in the orphanage, used with the YTP program. Here's some of the towels we had. There's a ministry in Cleveland, Operation Compassion, that gives away tile around the world for all the tile manufacturers. They gave us a 18-wheeler load of tile that we ended up shipping to Romania, and this is some of the apartments that the youth transition live in, that they retiled those. This is a God story here. I found this great ad on Craigslist one day. It said turf, sports turf, artificial grass. Called Eileen and said, hey man, could you use some turf up there? Because the orphanage parking lot in front of the building was just dirt and gravel. He said, yeah, so I bought it, sight unseen. Misleading ad said that you could pick it up in your trailer. I called the lady and said, I'm coming to pick it up. She says, you need an 18-wheeler. I was like, no, it says, she says, I'm telling you, this stuff is 3,000 pounds a roll. You'll never get it in your truck or your trailer. It laid there for a year. And they kept calling me, and they called me, and they're like, look, you got to come get your stuff. And I was like, I know. This is the problem. And I walked down Jeff's office, the door down from mine. I said, hey, Jeff's done some things with trucking in Raleigh. And I said, I need a special truck. I said, I can't ship it in a box truck. I can't send an 18-wheeler, which are easy things to do. I said, it's got to be a deck truck that they can get a fork truck to on both sides. He says, let me call a couple of people. He comes back within an hour and says, hey, I got a guy. He says he's got some trucks in that area. Just find out where they are, and we'll see if we can make it happen. I call the lady and get her address and relay it to Jeff. And turns out that company, it's a construction company here in the area, they had a truck 1 mile away from that location. A step deck truck, which meant it goes back and it steps down real low to the ground. And so they were like, yeah, we'll pick it up. Not only did they have the truck a mile away, that very truck was due to come to Greer to go into the shop that week. So he picked it up, brought it to me, dropped it off in the parking lot, put the truck in the shop, and says, no charge, no worries, thanks, it all worked out. So we were able, it's God working in things. So we were able to ship that over. Here it is, the container pulling off, leaving our parking lot. Here's that same container being offloaded in Bucharest, outside the city. There's the turf in the back of it. Because of Eileen's and Bread of Life's work and the excellence that they do things with, they developed a relationship with the food bank in Bucharest. And so the food bank all of a sudden gave them access to things they never had before. Fresh milk, yogurt, cheese, meats. Those things were luxuries when you're talking about feeding 100 kids 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, and feeding centers. So he found great favor with that ministry. It's run by an Orthodox guy, and he likes Eileen. He's ended up hiring 2 of Eileen's brothers to now work there. And we have been the recipient of thousands, tens of thousands of pounds of meat and cheese and produce. So we bought a walk-in commercial freezer for them. So again, you guys' faithfulness allows us to say, hey, we'll do this for you. We matched. We said, you raise half, we'll raise the other half. So this is 1 freezer. He's buying 2. And when we get the new building, we'll put the second freezer in that location. But this allows them to pick up, we had the opportunity to pick up 10,000 pounds of chicken sausage and distribute it, and then keep some at the home for the orphanage. And so we have freezers full of meat to feed the kids. Where this is in front of the orphanage, a few things I want you to take note of. See the fence on the street. This old wood picket fence. Where this is being built, used to be a house sitting there. And Eileen wanted to buy that house. And he went and talked to the owners, and said, look, if you ever want to sell it, we want to buy the house. A month or two later, he hears that it's for sale. And he goes and sees the owner and says, I want to buy the house. Oh, we've already made a deal. And he said, I was devastated. And I was there when it happened. And he says, man, I wanted that house. I said, Eileen, if God wants you to have it, it will be yours. I said, trust God. And it was easy for me to say. It wasn't me being spiritual. That deal drug on, and it fell through 2 times. And finally, they came back and said, Eileen, we want you to have the house, and we'll sell you the house. So it ended up becoming our property. So Eileen had the house torn down, cleaned out, and the kids had no place to play, no playground in front of the orphanage. So he built this, what was going to be a fenced-in soccer field. And here they are. They've hit the poles up for the nets to go around it. They're pouring the concrete, and there it is, finished. Man, isn't that cool? But what do you need on a soccer field? You need turf. Exactly. So there you have year-round green grass in the mountains of Romania with some crazy stripes on it that don't really match, but he says he likes it that way. Look at the fence. So in the middle of all this, another team of people from a ministry outside the United States, I can't even remember what country, if it was Belgium or somewhere in the Netherlands, a group came in and were working and helping with the orphanage. And one of the guys on the team says, I would have really liked to help you fix that fence and do some landscaping around your property. And so today there's a new fence, there's new pavers. The whole area is covered in pavers. There's no sand, no dust, no dirt anymore. And you'll see some pictures of that later, but here they are laying that turf down, and it's fun to see the kids out there. Firewood, the home burns firewood for heat. They have a big boiler system. That's about $1,000, $1,500 worth of firewood, and it takes about 13 loads a season. This year they ran out, and we had to kick in and buy another load, and we've already put the money up to buy this year's supply. He's already buying firewood and getting it in. So you they unload that truck, then they cut it up, and then it's got to be split, and they do that splitting mainly by hand, and the young men from the YTP program come up one weekend, and they get a bunch of axes and chop and split wood. It gets loaded in the truck and then taken to the back of the orphanage and unloaded. And here the younger boys are helping to get all that wood prepared and ready. We were just able to purchase this property behind the orphanage, and it will be cleaned up and put pavers in, and that wood will be stored in a dry location in the next few months. The showers in that place were dismal. There was one drain in the floor, so if you were showering, you were washing your feet with your neighbor's shower water. The ceiling leaked, the pipes, the showers from the next floor leak and drip down. And it's been a process of Eileen being encouraged, and with our partnership with Mark Morris in the Philippines. If there's one thing Mark has done in the Philippines in Samaritan's Place, is that place is top notch. You would be so impressed to go there and see that. And I kept helping Eileen to see. There was a previous person in that organization who wanted them to stay poor. The poorer we look, the more money we'll get. And I was like, Eileen, that's not pleasing to God. God wants you to do things at an excellence and a standard that He is worthy of. And we started pushing, and Eileen started seeing that vision. This, my friends, is the new showers. The workers ask if they can stay and shower instead of going home. This is one with the girls and one with the boys. Ventilation in the room, everything's waterproof. There's no leaking between the floors. They go in, they have a little changing area that they can set their stuff on and change and move into the shower area. Next, we have the sinks to do, and then there's an area of commodes that it's next on the list to be upfitted. Look at this. This is the landscaping. Brand new fence, planting, pavers, all carried out by another ministry. This is just last month when I was there. We are the largest employer in the county that this orphanage is located in, Brustin. This is in the mountains. This is in Brustin. This is the orphanage building itself. You see the court, the turf, and the surrounding.
How many kids can you put in there?
100. There's three floors, one floor for girls, one for boys. The bottom is the dining area and kitchen and so forth. So this brings us to the final. Give me just a quick time. I took y'all to Ukraine, so go with me to Romania. Eileen went out looking for a building. So here's the deal. So as time has progressed and Eileen has been faithful and Bread of Life has been faithful to carry out what God has put in front of them, Feed the Hungry, the ministry started by Lester Summerall, had partnered with us and was sending containers of food over that we would use to feed the feeding centers and supply those feeding centers. And because he was faithful and was a good steward of that resource, Feed the Hungry UK, which is another division, started sending him more. And then they reached out to him a year ago and said, hey, we want to reach into Moldova, Ukraine, and Bulgaria. You saw those on the map. But I didn't show Bulgaria. Bulgaria is on the south side of Romania. And we would like to use your facility, and you manage things well. We'll supply the food. We'll send you a container a month or more, and if you can help us get us out to those areas. We don't have the capacity at all to do that. So Eileen went looking for a building. He went looking for land, actually. And while he was looking at a piece of land, they left that spot and turned the corner, saw this building, and he jokingly told his brother-in-law, that's what we need right there. And his brother-in-law said, well, call. He says, what's it hurt to call? Well, long story short, Eileen calls. The guy wants the price up here. Eileen's is down here. The guy comes down here. Eileen goes down here. And the guy calls back and says, you know your second offer is lower than your first offer. He says, yeah, I know. We don't have that kind of money. So it's as you can see, it's an unfinished building. There's 3 floors there. The plan would be to fix the building, move the kids from the YTP program apartments, and move them into this building, separating them by floors. Then we could sell those apartments and help fund the upfit of this building. The downstairs is an open floor area. A church has already asked if they could rent that space and do an outreach church there, a church plant in that zone. The thing that appeals to us, one of the things that's on the back of it, there's already 10 rooms that are finished and ready and were being occupied by the company that was there as dormitory space already. It's a 5,000 plus square foot warehouse that's existing. The guy was doing heavy metal work, so the foundation is well reinforced. He wanted to put in heavy duty cranes, so there's more pilings and footers than we'll ever need. This is the building up front. That's the dorm rooms I was talking about that are existing and ready. This is the 5,000 square foot warehouse. This is the footer and foundation for another 5,000 square feet. And we've purchased in the deal enough room back here for 18-wheelers to come in and turn around and be able to pull back out. The gentleman who owns the property, he's needed to get out of some debt, and so we've got a good price. The war is helping the exchange rate from the euro. We have to convert to euros to the U.S. dollar, so things are working in our favor, even though we'd like to be in there now. Things move slow in foreign countries. Paperwork can be a nightmare, so that's where we are. So we are praising God for the way He supplied the money. Eileen is matching his half, and that money there's a miracle story behind that. I don't have the permission to share online with you right now. But it's a miracle. God met his side and blew him away. Eileen and I both had stories of friends who had stories of God miraculously providing and doing great things. And we're both talking this like, Eileen, this is our moment. We either choose to trust God that we've heard him on this and tell our own story, or we're going to live our life telling other people's stories. And that's scary as all get out. I don't care how much faith you have. But I have seen God be faithful in the last 2 months, beyond my imagination. So we're excited. So what does this allow us to do? This is an MP3 player. It's called a Bible Stick. It's created by a ministry that I got to know and have partnered with in the past. It's designed for the military. So they had a partner ship 2,500 of those in. It's got 2 little earbuds on there. It has no lights on it. It's just simple, push a button and it starts playing scriptures for you. And they're designed to be given to soldiers on the front line. They shipped 2,500 into Romania. I was able to say, hey, I've got a partner in Bucharest who can receive them and hold them for you, and we can get them to the border and ship them for you. Well, hey, guess what? They need batteries and a micro SD card put into them. Hey, Eileen, can you handle that? No problem. We got it covered. We've got 40 YTP kids sitting in Bucharest. So here are the girls putting in a battery, putting in a micro SD card. Here are the guys, some of them. Even broke out the ironing board to work off of. There are young people in other parts of the world being radicalized to do bad, terrible things. We have the opportunity to have 40 young people working to help get the Word of God into soldiers' hands at a critical time. We have Russian and Ukrainian ones. We picked those up on Wednesday, drove them with us to Suceava at the border, and on Friday we were getting pictures back from Ukraine where they had made it to the military chaplain's hands and he was getting ready to distribute them to the troops. We have a truck. This is the largest truck that the orphanage has. It's getting ready to cross the Ukrainian border on its way to meet these partners who offload the truck into vans, and we're distributing the food in the Odessa area. And this was a weekend, 2 weekends ago. Yeah, 2 weekends ago. They celebrated Easter last weekend. So right now, sitting in our warehouse are 200 mattresses because of Barney Gibson and Dean Norris and his wife. They work at North Greenville, and North Greenville had to change out their mattresses this year, and they said, hey, would you like some mattresses? I said, certainly I'd like some mattresses. And what do you do when you need mattresses? You need a truck. So what do? You call your friend Raleigh Kanoki. Raleigh, can I get a truck? Yeah, I'll send Dale with the truck. Dale comes up, we load up mattresses, and we bring them here, and we can store them in the warehouse. Barney says, hey, Mark, I got more sheets. You want more sheets? Don't laugh. I'm going to be recruiting people to help me fold sheets in a couple of weeks. I've got bags and bags of sheets to fold up. I found these crates. I was buying boxes to put sheets in. I'm a Facebook marketplace aholic sometimes. And I came across these crates for $2. And I thought, well, I'm paying $2 for a box they're going to throw away. Let's get a crate that they can reuse. So now we're sending 2 things for the dual purpose. These will be used to distribute food and groceries and feed to the feeding centers. So this is what we're doing, guys. This is why we need this building. This is how the building is going to be used. You've got Feed the Hungry, who wants a partner. We have another partner who is willing to ship more food in. In 2019, Eileen received 7 containers. In 2020, he thought with COVID hitting the United States, his support would cut back, his shipments would cut back, and so he cut back on some warehouse space to save money. At the end of 2020, he had received 12 containers. So the number kept going up. At the end of 2021, he had received 14 containers. We're talking 40-foot, 40,000 pounds or more of goods coming in. he is now expecting 10 containers in the next 2 months to show up, plus ours. So God is moving. And I kind of feel like he's waiting on us to catch up.